My name is Ann Hand, and I'm the CEO of Super League Gaming. Super League establishes competitive leagues for the everyday amateur gamer, so think kind of little league and minor league systems that all culminate in creating a feeder system or a path for people who want to be very closely associated with these real pioneers that I'm happy to moderate this panel on their behalf. To my right, I have Jack Etienne, who's the CEO and founder of Cloud9. Rick Fox, three-time NBA champion, of course, but also the founding partner of Echo Fox and Vision Venture Partners. To my left, first, Peter Levin, president of Lionsgate Interactive Venture and Games, and also an owner of the team, The Immortals. Bruce Stein, CEO and co-founder of Axiomatic Sports and an owner of Team Liquid. And Peter Vlastelica, president and CEO of Major League Gaming, which is a division of Activision. So lots of topics to cover here today. I think just to kick off a little bit with you, Jack, very specifically with Cloud9. I believe you started about 5 years ago in this space. Really early days. And Cloud9, if you're not aware, has really established itself as a really powerful brand in the professional esports arena. And you're also probably someone who is much more involved in the day-to-day running of a team than most of our panelists. So curious to just hear a little bit about what you've learned in these last 5 years, and as these newer investors, relatively speaking, kind of what some of your thoughts are and advice for them.
Well, it's really been a whirlwind in the last 5 years. It's trying to summarize what's happened in the last 5 years would be really difficult, but at the core of it, the passionate audience that I saw 5 years ago is still there and growing. And I saw 5 years ago that the audience was young, hungry, and excited to consume this esports content. And I was so excited, being a part of it back then, that I knew I wanted to move away from everything else I was doing to focus on it full time.
That's great. And what's your advice to these new investors coming into the space?
I think it's, every day you read another, probably 2 or 3 articles on esports and how it's exploding. I think it's really important to understand, if you're looking to invest in esports, that you're buying a long-term investment. Mm-hmm. You need to be planning for 5 years plus to get to where we're going. We've made tremendous growth, but we're not there yet. So you're getting in early. That's awesome. Be a part of it. It's exciting. You can throw on a shirt for the team you're behind and scream like crazy and love it, because that's the type of investment that you're getting involved in. But don't expect returns tomorrow. Yeah. Be ready for the long haul. Build your brand, build your fan base, and build something great to be excited about in the future.
Yeah. And I guess I turn it to maybe you, Bruce. You've recently acquired Team Liquid. What are your insights from the team perspective? What do you want the teams to understand in these early days of your decisions to invest and how this opportunity will be meaningful to them?
Our decision to invest was really built on recognition of a giant audience that was not fully commercialized. And when we looked at the team, it was a first step, and a really important step, to be able to have an authentic voice in the space. Sure. But it was just the beginning of what we wanted to do in a number of different verticals, because a large part of the world is still not in esports. And it's one of those areas where when you find that giant of an audience, that passionate of an audience, that's highly educated, that is motivated they spend 20 hours a week watching. Mm-hmm. That was something we wanted to find a number of inroads into, to try to find ways that we could build businesses around the teams.
Yeah. Do the players really get it about when they see the big checks coming in, what it's for? Do you feel that way, Rick, being an owner in the early days? Did the players feel like this was a piece of that check was for them and maybe not for the future investment?
I think what we're discovering at Echo Fox is not only are we a part of the community now as owners and as a team watching these leagues and spring up and grow, but we're also finding that we're having to be leaders and educators, not only to our community and to those that want to come in, but also to our young pros. And when I look to my right to Jack, who has been great at doing that, as he was one of my early mentors coming into space.
Nice.
You notice that there is a shift from just a gamer enjoying what they're doing to making it a career and a life for themselves. And with that comes all the regular skill sets that one would need to survive as a professional in life, regardless of what your career path may be.
Yeah.
So yes, we're educating a lot more and pointing to this next generation wave of professional athletes on what it means to be a pro.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I do want to dig in a little bit later in the panel on that, because I think you've been very insightful on the stigma of gamers and some ways that we can try to alleviate that. So with that, the monetization model, you started to get into it a little bit, Bruce. Pete, launching this very exciting, offer of Major League Gaming around the Overwatch franchise as well. What are your insights, I guess, first of all, on how you're thinking about monetization? And then I'd like, Bruce, for you to jump in if you're thinking about differently from your side.
Okay. So first of all, I'm fairly new to the esports world. I've been in this role at Activision Blizzard for about 6 months. So I'm learning from all of these folks every day. But prior to that, I was in the traditional sports world. And our focus right now is on taking some of the things that we know work really well from traditional sports and apply them to esports, not to completely try to replace the structure that exists today in esports, but to bring some things that we think are missing from the current landscape. If you look at the current landscape, I think one of the issues is it's a bit of an overgrown, untended garden in terms of structure. In other words, it's kind of like boxing. In boxing, boxing is a very sort of bottom-up, organized sport. You never quite know what you're watching when you watch a boxing match. You don't know what happens if when one guy wins. I mean, you know that one guy's trying to knock the other guy out. You know that, but you don't know the sort of the impact of the match. And even if he wins a belt, you don't quite know which belt he wins. Like, what does that belt mean versus a different belt? There's just not a lot of structure, and I think esports is sort of like that right now. And it's a good thing in a lot of ways. It means that it's sort of grown up in this grassroots, bottom-up, community-driven way, and that needs to be preserved. But there are things about traditional sports, sort of the league-structured traditional sports that I think are missing, like local revenue opportunities for team operators. If you're an MLS owner, the majority of the revenue that you drive around your team comes from your local market. It doesn't actually come from media rights. Right now, there are no local revenues, so local sponsorship, ticket sales, locally sold merchandise. None of that really exists in esports right now. And there also aren't incentives for teams to contribute to leagues who can monetize outside of local markets through things like media rights or global sponsorships. In other words, in all the league structures that exist today, teams aren't participating in those revenues. And so really, if you're a team, you've got access to sponsorship of your jersey and your sort of digital presence, and you win prize pools, like tennis or golf or a sport like that. So what we're trying to do is apply a little bit of structure, not too much, but a little bit of structure that we've seen work in traditional sports to this sort of grassroots, community-driven, bottom-up sport of esports. The Overwatch League, which you mentioned, is kind of the biggest initiative along those lines that we're working on now, and I can sort of probably get into that later. I'm sure there'll be some discussion about the Overwatch League.
So, Bruce, do you see it as following a traditional sports monetization model?
It's actually a great question, because in our ownership group, we have owners of 2 basketball teams, 2 baseball teams, 2 hockey teams, and a football team. And I think all of us that are on the sports side view ourselves as students of people like Jack more than teachers, because we don't look at this in some ways as a sport, because we think it might be narrowcasting, because it's a cultural shift. I mean, the engagement that you have with esports is original content, live events, streaming, mobile, all these different avenues that are native to a digital-first format, which is what esports is. And for that reason, we're trying to look at it culturally as a different type of experience to see where we can learn from guys like Jack, where we can leap off and add disciplines we may know from traditional sports or traditional entertainment like Peter would have.
Yeah.
Because it's also original content based.
Absolutely. So Peter, you were one of the first studio, I think, to jump into the space. Why did you do that, and how are you seeing the opportunities of where you want to play and how you want to play?
A couple of reasons. I mean, first and foremost, the demographics are so wildly compelling. So you've got both an extremely attractive consuming constituency coupled to very elusive demographics. And so I think the thing that we haven't talked a lot about, and we probably will later, is the marketer-driven component to esports. The types of conversations that we're having with global brands, the lack of institution, if you will, around how to port those brands into everything that we're doing. There's nothing but upside and ceiling to that. So I feel like we're at the first at bat in the first inning of a baseball game. And I think to Bruce's point and to the point that's been made several times over, we also have a very diverse background of ownership. We're fortunate to have Mike Milken as an investor, as well as Steve Kaplan, co-founder of Oak Tree Capital, who owns half the Memphis Grizzlies and a Premier League soccer club. And having the discipline from financial engineering, global sport. We've been gaming citizens of the world for a very long time, and we're waiting for the right opportunity to pounce in North America. We were presented with one, Clinton Foy sitting over there on his phone. The chairman of Immortals brought us the opportunity early on, and just because of who is involved from a management standpoint, from a prospective ownership standpoint, it was extremely compelling to us. We're also investors with Crosscut in Mob Crush. Think of it as a live streaming Twitch for mobile gaming. So we also have some skin in the game on the platform side. And then on the production side, we're majority owners in the largest unscripted competitive reality production company in Pilgrim Entertainment. They produce Ultimate Fighter and Wicked Tuna and Top Shot. And so we're now working with them and currently the world's largest esports promoter, ESL, creating competitive formats around IP in the world of esports. So it's a very natural environment for us to be in. We like being in early. We like being in my instance, I'm sitting around the table with guys far smarter than myself, other than you, Clinton, because you're on your phone. So it's a very fertile environment, and it's also very fraternal, right? So when Peter Guber was getting in and contemplating getting in, we had long conversations about this. We had long conversations with Cloud9. At this point in this nascent early stage of the game, there's a lot of sharing of information. And gaming, I think, as well, has always been somewhat fraternal, and it's parlayed really, really well into esports. Now, as these things become more valuable and more competitive, I'm sure that will cease, but in the interim, it's very fraternal.
We're enjoying it, yeah. Certainly when I was out raising money, it helped a lot that you were all a tight network of people. And so, once I met one of you, it seemed that it just opened the floodgates to meeting all of the power players in the space. Let's dig in a little bit on ad sponsor, because I think Jack brings a unique perspective. You were the former VP of sales of Crunchyroll. For those of you who don't know, that's a kind of the premier subscription channel for anime. So it's a nice one-for-one target, so to speak, with the everyday social gamer. What did you learn in that role, and what did you bring to Cloud9 that you think has made your sponsor strategy most effective?
Yeah, I'm taking the leap from doing sales at Crunchyroll, which has pretty much 100% overlap in the demographic. Yep. It's heavily male-focused, young, like 16 to 25-year-olds. And starting to, initially, my first experience with esports was to represent Team Solomon, which is one of the top brands in esports. And when I realized the overlap in the audience, it was easy for me. I already had people buying Crunchyroll, so I just started introducing these people who are already buying Crunchyroll to TSM and their audience, and they loved it. They're like, just get me more. Because when I was at Crunchyroll, I had an inventory issue. I didn't have a buyer issue. And when I found Team Solomon, it was just like immediately I was able to open them up to this demographic. Was virtually untapped. And so when it came time for me to start my own brand, I was day one profitable because I had people just looking for the inventory.
Yeah.
And so that my experience at Crunchyroll was invaluable.
So just an open question to all of you. If you are close to the gaming space, you often hear the classic, maybe overused too much word of authenticity. And so there's not a lot of channels for brands to get to these young social gamers, but also they're a little gun shy, right? Because they're a little intimidated by what's the right way to talk to these gamers and have it be meaningful and not feel like they're being exploited or commercialized. So, what are your thoughts on that or your lessons learned?
I think that's really important. These fans are extremely intelligent, and they will catch on if someone's trying to sell them something that's not authentic. So I think some of the things that my sponsors have done that have been really interesting is that they've tried to create content that they're going to be interested in right away. So Axe recently sponsored both TSM and Cloud9, and then we were competing our teams and our stars against each other in games that the fans love. And so that content naturally was jumping to the top of Reddit because people wanted to see Bjergsen play against Sneaky, which are two different players on these teams. And so I think that's a really cool way for brands to engage multiple esports teams, clash them against each other in events that are going to get their fans excited, and they don't even have to promote it. They don't have to go buy advertising to boost their post like on Twitter because the fans are going to love it, and it's going to naturally rise up in the forums that they go to anyways. And
did you intentionally have the integration of the actual brand itself be quite subtle in that content?
It would be brought to you by Axe, so it really wasn't like in your face, like, hey, the guy's putting on deodorant. It was just in the background, but people were like, hey, cool, check out this cool activation. And, we set it up like that purposefully. Like obviously, I represented TSM 5 years ago, so I have a very good relationship with TSM, and I was able to work with TSM to build this package and present it to Axe. It was really easy for them to basically buy something that's already made for them. But yeah, I think it was a really good way to activate as a sponsor into esports.
So, given content, original content is so valuable. If the email alert I got yesterday was accurate, it said that last Thursday night on the CW, H1Z1's program got ratings very similar to the NHL. And I believe Twin Galaxies and part of Vision Ventures was involved in that. First of all, did I read that correctly?
I hope so.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we saw some impressive numbers for sure. And we're quite proud of what we've been able to accomplish at Vision Entertainment. Our group and my partners at VVP looked at the ecosystem, and as we looked at the ecosystem, we saw the traditional sports route mirror what we're seeing here at esports, with the understanding, as Jack said, it is a long-term investment. There's a lot of work to be done, but if you understand that as I stood in Madison Square Garden and looked and saw a league, Riot Games, League of Legends, with teams, owners, players, all present, and then I looked out and I saw a vast number of fans had gathered together to fill up Madison Square Garden for 2 complete days, and then I crossed paths with curious advertisers at the time, sponsors looking at the space, those that are reaping benefits now for coming in to the space and being a legitimizer and a partner in that growth. And then you started to see, I ran into Adam Silver, from Commissioner of the NBA, I ran into John Skipper, ESPN. You started to see broadcast rights and media rights holders looking at this as an opportunity to grab an audience base that we all know here on the stage is present and really hungry to be acknowledged and celebrated. And then as that step forward, my partners at Vision Venture Partners, we basically invested in EchoFox along with Twin Galaxies, which we feel is the next wave, the data and analytics side of things, which pop up, which tell you who to play, who to pay, and who's going to be best for your team. And then we all know the original content, unscripted or scripted side of things, tells these stories of these players, tells the stories of our teams and leagues, and really encompasses what this world is all about, which is the culture around esports. So H1Z1 was the first opportunity for us to partner with a publisher, Daybreak, to bring a game in H1Z1 to the esport community. It was showcased in partnership with the CW It was met with great reviews and great numbers. And so we took a relationship where today it's hard, and Jack will tell you this, and guys here will tell you too. You don't just, every game and publisher wants to be an esport, right? Because it markets their game at the forefront. But you just don't make an esport. It has to be something that kind of, the community galvanizes around it, they understand it, and they support it. And so we spent a year leading up to that. And the CW event was the first showcase of H1Z1 as an esport, and our partners, my partner Stratton Sklavos, who comes from VeriSign, but also background at the San Jose Sharks as an owner, professional sport owner. Jace Hall was Warner Brothers Interactive, and he built that industry over there, which is the gaming side of their business, and then Amit Razada, which is the fintech business buy and sell side of it. So we have what we feel is a pretty darn good team to not only be in this community, in this conversation, but leaders in this space. And as it is fraternity-based right now, we're all pulling together to make this a larger conversation and for it to really anchor in and take on that traditional sporting world, because esports is now professional sports, and it will become more of an easy conversation to have.
Yeah. So Peter, does it surprise you that these cord cutters or nevers went to TV last week?
No, it's great. I mean, we're very supportive of whether it's CW with H1Z1 or whether it's Turner and E-League, partnering with WME and IMG and Valve. These exercises, ESPN, being so vocal about their commitment to esports and their reporting on esports and their openness to conversations around it, taking those shots on goal is great for everybody. So, they're not all going to work. And some of them, again, I think are packaging it in a bit of a lighter fare. And we're doing that similarly. We have a first ever real-time player versus player fighting game on mobile for our Power Rangers film. And we are going to do some really fun activation around that game at some of the largest esports promotions in the world. And that will allow for us to engage fans in a lighter way, not taking it too seriously, obviously recognizing that there's real competition going on the big stage. But it's almost like the fan fests around Super Bowls or NBA All-Star Weekend. So I think finding approachable ways, and I think what the CW is doing, what Turner is doing, can help accomplish that. But finding soft landings, if you will, for folks who may not be as hardcore, nothing but good for everybody sitting up here.
Bruce, what is Axiomatic's position or strategy around content?
Well, we have the same strategy for content that we have for other verticals that we're in, including consumer products, and a really clever investment that we made in this theater gaming environment called Super League Gaming.
I'll take the plug anytime I can get it.
Each one of those verticals we've approached as different businesses, and our partnerships are different. And Jack and I talked about the importance of that at one point months ago, where in our consumer product side we have vendor relationships that in China and inventing relationships that bring a unique set of attributes to that category. If you just try to, maybe it was Jack that was talking about the authentic part, but if you just try to label slap in a traditional licensing format, I think you're going to fall flat. The audience we treat as unique where it is today, that is the hardcore gamer goes after a specific type of gaming format, but there's also the opportunity for other demographics that already show an aptitude and an interest in gaming and expect that out of their content. They expect more from their content than to be a passive journeyman. They want to be engaged, and that goes back to the launch of PlayStation and Atari 2600, and those were really people interacting with content. This is just almost taking it to the extreme. So I think our goal is going to be finding a niche for each of the audiences that will find interactive gaming a compelling pastime.
So you're really thinking kind of wide and diverse audience here, and
yeah. Plus, I don't think all fans are going to look the same.
Yeah.
The people that understand League of Legends and Overwatch are probably very different than the fans that are understanding Hearthstone. And to the extent you find applications outside the game into consumer products and IP, I think you have to contour it for that to become consistent with other demographics, lifestyles, because that's what I think the hardcore gamer gets out of this space right now. They get something that services their lifestyle in a very authentic way, and to the extent you veer from those rules, you know, you're in perilous territory.
What an exciting landscape for brands.
Yeah.
When you look at that diversity of audiences that they can really now have a different level of meaningful engagement with. So it's exciting. So let's dig in a little bit more onto where the game publishers are going with the league structures and their work with the teams. Pete, could you just give us a little bit of color on where things are with the Overwatch League was announced, was it last kind of November timeframe at BlizzCon? And how are things going? And perhaps just help our audience understand a little bit about the decision you're making and the path you're taking and how that's different than traditional publishers.
Sure, I'll do that. I also want to just comment on the point about broadcast and distribution quickly, because I'm staring at the title of this panel, and the question is, are esports ready for the big time? And you know, the trite answer to that is, yeah, of course. You know, there are 1 billion male millennials in the world, and 22% of them watch esports. You know, that sounds big time to me. But I think if by big time, a lot of times when people ask questions like that, they mean, is it ready to be on TV, and is it ready to be treated like a, you know, a big 4 sport? And to that, I ask, what's so great about the big time? Because you know, esports, being a digital native sport, really the first digital native sport, has significant structural advantages over traditional sports. Traditional sports are trapped behind the television paywall, which kids don't subscribe to. Kids don't watch TV. And so, you know, that's why the average age of an NFL fan has gone up from 43 to 49 in the last 10 years, and baseball fans are almost 60 on average, and NBA fans are like the young fans at almost 40. Meanwhile, esports fans are, you know, 16 to 30. And the reason esports fans are 16 to 30 isn't because the content is necessarily so much more tailored or suited for young people, although it is, but it's also a function of distribution, because you know, this is content that's available on the platforms and devices at the times when kids want it and where kids want it. And I think it's a really important point. And so, you know, our goal is not necessarily to get content on TV. It's nice to have content on TV. It makes it, you know, there's a sort of marketing halo that comes with it, I think, sometimes. And certainly, if the revenue opportunities are there, we're interested. But we're not dependent on it. And I think that's a really important point. There are ways to make money in this category outside of the traditional ecosystem that are much more suited to the taste of the audience.
Sure.
So now I'll talk quickly about the Overwatch League, because I took all my time doing that.
You can take all the time you need.
So with the Overwatch League, we're trying for the first time, I think, in esports to apply a little bit of structure and, frankly, even some scarcity to the way that an esports program is run around a title like Overwatch. Overwatch, for those who don't know, it's a relatively new game. It's been around for about a year, open to the public. 30 million people play it around the world. That's 30 million paying players. In other words, unlike a game like League of Legends, which is a free-to-play game, Overwatch costs $60 to play. And it's distributed, the audience is distributed pretty nice and evenly around the globe. And what we're doing with Overwatch is selling city-based franchises globally to operators who really understand how to build fan bases in their local market. And then we'll operate the first global city-based league in esports. And really, if you think about it, the first global city-based league in any sport. There's no other sport that I can think of, at least, where Shanghai plays Houston. That will happen with the Overwatch League once we launch it. And again, I think, you know, the opportunity here is, from an investment perspective, is to unlock a lot of sort of value creation opportunities that simply don't exist in the esports ecosystem today, like all those local revenue opportunities I was talking about earlier, and like the share of big global media rights revenues, sponsorship revenues, merchandise revenues, which aren't today shared with owners of esports teams. So we're out in market now selling these franchises, and we've said that this is a 2017 initiative for the company, and we're very excited about it. We think it will work, and we think that when it works, it'll be a nice model for bringing the whole space forward.
Great. And in your opinion, relative to the traditional model that Riot's had with relegation, and what do you help us understand kind of why this is such a sharp contrast, and do you foresee that other publishers will follow the path you're taking?
Yeah, I do foresee that other publishers will follow this path. I mean, the contrast is really, you mentioned relegation. That's certainly one thing, which panelists here can comment on. But the reality is, in the way that a league like LCS and other publisher-driven leagues and other kind of open format leagues have been operated, no team is guaranteed a right or an opportunity to compete in the league. It's sort of performance-driven, or it has been, or by invitation. And so, one of the things that we're changing with the Overwatch League is that we will create these permanent city-based, territorially exclusive rights that will come along with a franchise, meaning. Short of sort of terrible behavior, if you buy into the league, you're in the league.
So just like there's NBA teams that have good years and bad years, you'll have a suite of franchise teams, and kind of the strongest will survive or do well, but your spot is secured nonetheless if you pay in.
Right.
Yeah. So it does vastly change the economics model from the investor side, right, Bruce? Because now you're having to write some checks you didn't have to write previously for franchises. So there's an added investment there, but certainly it takes away a lot of the risk of relegation and other things going away. So I can kind of see some of the pluses and minuses there. Does it incent you to have less games in your portfolio? Once you've secured that franchise slot, to just kind of blow it out with your League of Legends or your Overwatch teams and maybe not have as wide of a portfolio of players?
Well, so far, green matter has not been the restrictor in the category because a lot of people have been putting money into it. We've been a little shorter of gray matter, but we're glad to see that that's coming in too. I think we're going through a process with Blizzard where we look at Blizzard and say they're probably one of the best, if not the best, traditional esports companies out there. And when they launch a game like Overwatch, and it's, as Pete said, it's about a year old, we're trying to get our hands around metrics that are not defined yet. When you have a digital-first format sport, and you go, wow, when it was baseball, you can be in the venue, and that's the first format. And TV is a rebroadcast of it. In esports, the digital format is the format. And so what we're trying to get our hands around, and it's a bold move, I think, on their part to say, we want to establish these city franchises and build out these sports the way they are done in more traditional areas. And like many people, we're going through, how does this work? How do we best take advantage of it? And is it, the kind of business where we can see adding enough value from our group?
Yeah, very much. Your thoughts, Peter?
It's fascinating to watch how aggressively, Blizzard has embraced this new structure, this new format, the kinds of folks they're bringing in, both from traditional worlds of sport, and veterans from the esports arena. I think their lineage, and it's been referenced, but StarCraft being part of their portfolio, the first real esport of scale and note globally. It's a good thing for us to see these big pubs taking different types of shots on goal, trying to figure it out. To Bruce's point, I don't think there's a tremendous lack of capital being deployed, but now it's about, let's see how these models pan out, kind of forensically, what's working, what is not. There's been a tremendous amount of contemplation in the conversations we've had with the big pubs is they're trying really to institutionalize what they're doing, but at the same time, we like the fact that there's still an openness to know that there's going to be tweaking and pivoting along the way. You know, nobody knows exactly how this is all going to play out. When I look at the title of this panel, eSports Ready for the Big Time, I actually didn't think they were referencing broadcasting. I thought it was more about these types of conversations. Are we going to come up with a better mousetrap in terms of a business model versus some of the traditional sports that are flagging? Are we going to come up with a better business model with marketers and brands and advertisers to create this creative inventory that we're talking about and leverage their massive footprints? Those are the conversations that are the most exciting to us now, because we are starting with a bit of a clean slate. It is an extremely native digital product with an extremely native digital audience, and that's never existed before.
Sure.
So I think as aggressive as everyone's being, it's also, we caution ourselves and we make ourselves tap the brakes at time, and let's just step back and, you know, look at how these pieces are all going to play out.
Yeah. I think it's exciting too with Bruce being the, you know, with his leadership roles at Mattel and Hasbro. You alluded to consumer products earlier. So you're really thinking widely about revenue streams that might be more non-traditional even?
Well, I think what Pete said that I liked, and since everybody's commented about the title, I'll take my shot at it. I think the question is the big time ready for esports? And what that means is when Pete said we're thinking outside the box about other formats, that's, I think, what's incumbent on us, to be able to come up with formats and distribution mechanisms and products that enhance what the audience is genuinely and authentically seeking. That's where I think you're going to have the breakout revenue models, not necessarily because we're going to impose you know, a discipline we know from another business and say, it's going to work here because, you know, we had a kiss cam in a venue. We're going to start doing that inside of an esports venue. I mean, I know that's overly simplistic, but I think thinking outside the box, as Pete said, is what it's really incumbent on us to be able to find other formats. In the consumer product sides, we're working really on the R&D side now. We're not even close to having yet another product that really adds something beyond. There's mice, there's, you know, sort of endemic products that fit, but that isn't really, I think, what's going to break and enhance the consumer experience.
Yeah. So given it is completely new territory and we don't want to kind of cram those traditional models on top of it, I am curious about when we do look to traditional sports, there is the role of the individual player and the value they bring in building a franchise. And do you think that's something, both Rick and Jack, I'd love your comments on that, about, do you think that's something that esports would benefit from as you're trying to establish the value of your teams and also just pulling forward that fan base and some of the powerful storyline behind it?
The storylines, definitely. When you look at traditional sports, you see the individuals are well expressed. Their journey to excellence, and even amidst their excellence, just who they are beyond that. And therefore, then if you're a young man or woman looking to aspire to have a career such as one that's professionally based, you want to look to a mentor. You want to look to someone, and if you don't know those stories, in their journeys, you don't know how to get there. Where's that blueprint? So when we talk about the original content that comes with, we look at traditional esports, it was made by the esports fans themselves, and now you have more established content creators coming in to tell those stories. The more those stories are told, and the more Super League gaming side of things starts to give a young fan the opportunity to start to develop at a young age, which is pretty much based like the AAU system, then you can have leagues come along or systems come along like Twin Galaxies, which we're invested in, which not only celebrates the games, but celebrates the player. And that's where I see the model, we see the model shifting. We love that these games are being made by these publishers. We love gaming. But at the same time, for the conversation to shift, it has to shift towards the player themselves.
Yep.
And that's what I think we're seeing, and that's what we're about. And if you tell those stories, we'll know more about those players like the NBA players or the baseball players you see today.
Yep. Great. And Jack, your thoughts on player stories and also stickiness to your franchise of Cloud9?
So one of the most unique things about esports stars is that the amount of access in the actual conversation that the fans can have with our star players. So when one of my players has like a full day of actually games on stage, or maybe 6 hours even scrims, they can go practice their individual skills in the game publicly by broadcasting that game on Twitch. So Sneaky, after a full day of work, goes and streams for another 6 hours. And he's just not broadcasting him playing the game that the fans love. He's actually interacting with the audience that entire time. And so, 170 plus hours a month, this player is actually having conversations with his fans. So there's a tie between my star player and the fans that no other traditional sports has. That they can basically donate to him $5, yo, play this song, or watch this video with me, and he'll go watch it with all the other fans watching. There's nothing else out there like that. So when he tells those fans, yo, hey, go check out, Tesla. This has got a new cool M3 coming out. It's going to be good for you. Or they're going to check it out. Yeah, they're going to go check out Axe. They're going to check out these products that support us. And so, because there's a very strong tie between that pro star player and the fans love him.
How do you find the next great player?
What's really great about digital sports is everything is tracked. And so depending on the game and the access that I have to statistics out of the game, I can see the rising stars rising up out of the players who aren't stars. And they really just, the cream just rises to the top. You just see this player is just phenomenal. He's putting a ton of time in the game. He's got results individually that are far superior to the other players out there. And that's your intro into finding that player. And then you need to have discussions with that player to find out, is this guy, okay, I can tell he's an amazing individual player. Is this guy a good teammate? Because if you don't have both those boxes checked, an amazing player, fantastic teamwork, extraordinary communicator, if you can't check all those boxes, you don't have a player that's going to play well in esports. Yep. So it's a deep, you got to do a deep research into that player beyond just his personal, amazing solo skills.
I mean, that's so right on. When I think of when Echo Fox came to existence, finding these players, it was usually you go to Twitch or you go to a site and they're streaming and their personalities, but you truly don't know if they are pros. Yeah. And that's why we invested in Twin Galaxies, because as Twin Galaxies is the adjudicating world record holding for all video games, we wanted to stretch that and now go on the search for who are the best actual gamers. And as you build them with Super League Gaming, and we find them as they post their scores. And when we did our H1Z1 event for the CW and Daybreak, we went and drafted from our leaderboards on Twin Galaxies. We put up in a combined fashion the different challenges that we needed them to compete in, and we found the top ranked players that bubbled up from all over the world, and we formed our team, and then we sent them out. To Jack's point, you don't know if they're going to be good teammates. You don't know if they can play in a team environment, but that's what pro sports is all about. You get your coaches, you get your support system around them, and then you start to create your best team. But you got to find the individual first, and the analytics and the data that's starting to pop up around this is going to be extremely valuable. Yeah.
I will say, and I say this with a little humor and a lot of humility, Pete, but when you said that you were the first city-based eSports league, we do have a proud member of the LA Shockwaves here, Monkey Man. So we've got a super leaguer in the audience who came to the Milken Conference. So very good, very good. And so certainly we agree that there's something powerful when you bring people into physical spaces to test their chops, their teamwork, their sportsmanship and collaboration skills, kind of the heat of the pressure I'm sure you're feeling at the Playa Vista Cinemark every Saturday representing. But there is this kind of character building and this emotional intelligence layer that we all know in traditional sports is vital, right? It's mind, body, and soul. So, what are your thoughts on that as far as, the stigma that we have that we know these kids are real, devoted, human, active, multidimensional.
And they should be celebrated. Yeah. They should be celebrated. And I was a gamer at your age. I grew up playing video games. It's where I found my competitive fire first before I found the game of basketball. But individual desire, when it meets competition, will truly tell you who you are as a person. And I think you're discovering that now, right? And as we move forward, my son now at the age of 22 has moved on to becoming a game designer. So he's used his passion in so many different ways to live in the world of not only esports, but in video games, which obviously is your passion. So I encourage you to keep going, and hopefully someday you bubble up on the leaderboards of Twin Galaxies and we draft you to Echo Fox.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
You can check him out right now on superleague.com. Monkey Man,
do that.
everybody.
Monkey Man. How'd you come up with your name?
Well, I don't really remember because I made it like 6.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really remember, but it's a good name.
It's a great name. I love it.
One of the things I think we can relate to, being a little different generation than Monkey Man, is that we kind of, our physical selves, we kind of defined who we were before our digital selves, right? Then we got a chance to create who our aspirational self on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever social side of our pleasure. But you picked Monkey Man probably at a pretty young age, right? Yeah, 7 years old. So at 7, he decided who his unique aspirational self was. And what we find at our events is kids kind of strut in as Monkey Man, not kind of the way that the rest of the world sees you. So what kind of insights, Peter, do you think that says about how we think about this audience differently?
I think it's really healthy that the bottom up, the percolation has already started to form. Companies like yourselves, working with partners that are extremely valuable to folks like us, your exhibition partners, and these location-based retail footprints, that they're wrapping their brain around it and activating against it and creating that, whoever said the AAU, I think Rick, you did. It's a great analogy, and it's a very healthy bellwether of where this bucket of activity is going when you have these massive top-down plays. And again, we're in Los Angeles, right? So we've got Blizzard, Activision, Riot, ESPN's hub downtown, so many of the higher profile, more well-known teams based here. So we really are, at least for now, the hub of North American esports. And so to have companies like Super League, again, propagating these kids and building them up. And then there's I'm certainly not going to share our strategy of how we find our players. So I'm not sure they fully disclosed how they find our players. But that there are multiple opportunities and there's optionality there. And it's just getting more and more sophisticated. And that inures to the benefit, at least of us on the ownership side.
Yeah. So there's now over 20 scholarships for League of Legends at colleges and universities in the United States, which often surprises people. Bruce, how important do you think that is for validating, the power of esports and the positivity of it?
Well, recently I had a chance to speak to Governor Ducey in Arizona, who was talking to me about the scholarship programs he wanted to bring into Arizona. And I was kind of fascinated where he said, these esports fans are precisely the kinds of people we want to attract academically. So they're more like academic athletes, intellectual athletes that bring STEAM qualities and expertise in peripheral processing and pattern recognition that you don't necessarily always get. And so they look at this as a way to not only enhance a passion for students, but also it gets them the right kind of student body in terms of where their academic interests are. So in this case, I think it's almost like a natural for them. They fall right into a lot of academic programs, whether it's computer science, and Jack knows this better than anyone, but there's several guys on our team that had like perfect SAT scores, and these guys are uber smart, and they have tremendous processing capabilities. Not in addition to dexterity and the ability to game and have strategy. So I think it fits perfectly. Maybe almost you couldn't contour it any better for a screening system to get students that could do well academically as well as pursue their gaming passions.
Absolutely. And given, I believe I've heard before that the average pro gamer kind of there's not one older than 25, is that correct? Right now in the professional sports landscape?
I think it's like a misperception that
Okay.
that players will be washed up by 25. And I think what the reason why we saw a lot of the early esports players retire around that age is that the opportunities for building a career weren't there.
Sure, sure.
But we're seeing like the Virtus Pro guys, they're in their they're 30, and they're still winning tournaments. If you look at Dota 2, the guys who've been winning events there have been winning them for like a decade. These guys, now that they have the opportunity to actually make a great living playing esports, their games of choice, they're sticking around, and because that's a place where they can make the most money for their families. And I think we're going to see players playing into the mid 30s, maybe 40, because they physically they can keep up. And now they've got all this experience that the young players don't have, and they're much more stable, and they're able to handle the emotional ups and downs that you go through as a team. It's hard to take a loss, and it's easy to point a finger at your teammate. And sometimes it's hard to say, hey, we lose as a team, we win as a team. Let's figure out what went wrong here and get better and crush them next time.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that with older players, and I'm certain that we're going to see players getting, like the average player age getting older and older as like the value of that experience is realized.
That's exciting to imagine those iconic players emerging in esports the same way we know who those people are in traditional sports that know how to carry a team and really play that additional leadership role.
Honestly, for me, like the thing that I need to hold on to and make sure that my players have is the passion to keep grinding it out and playing hard. And if I can find a player who's like 35 but still has a passion to just play that game like crazy, that guy is going to be playing for me. The moment a player loses his passion to actually play the game, he shouldn't be on Cloud9.
That's great. We don't have a lot of time left, so we could talk so much more about what makes a game an esport, and will there be more or less in the landscape in the coming months and years. So I encourage you to kind of keep an eye in the press and kind of watch as some of those other conversations unfold, especially the monetization model, which is definitely, as we've agreed here today, is pretty open terrain and a lot less known than known. With that, I am kind of curious, and I'm going to go a little kind of, since we've gone a little deep and emotional on the player, I'm just curious if we just kind of start with Pete and work our way down. Anytime you start a new job or you go into a new space, there's kind of a moment or an inflection point when your kind of emotional hook kicks in. Where are you kind of in that kind of journey? I mean, why does gaming matter?
Yeah, so I've played video games my whole life, so I had a bit of a foundation, but I never, sort of thought of myself as a hardcore gamer by any means, and I wasn't sort of into esports prior to taking this job. But in the last 6 months, I've certainly gotten hooked. I think this was the first year since I was 11 that I didn't fill out a March Madness bracket. Like, I just didn't pay attention to it. I was too focused on esports. I think the moment, if I had to I try to identify one moment when that happened. It was at one of our Call of Duty events a few months ago when, I'd been really trying to pay attention and figure this game out. I don't play the game, but I really enjoy watching it. And there was one play that happened that blew my mind. I was sitting in the front row, and I saw the guy make the move, and I jumped out of my seat and started screaming. And I looked around, and so did other people who knew what was going on. And that was a moment where I realized, I get it. And this is an experience not unlike I've had watching my favorite NBA team hit a game-winning three-pointer or something. And since then I've sort of been in this very sort of focused place sort of as an esports fan, not just executive. And what's encouraging to me about that is that I've been a game I've played games my whole life. I've been a sports fan my whole life, but it's only been recently that I've sort of been turned on to esports. Obviously, I had a professional reason to do it, but now I'm a fan. It's encouraging that could happen so easily to me, because I know that it can also happen to billions of other people out there who are similar to me but not yet considering themselves hardcore esports fans.
That's great. Bruce?
I think in anybody's career, you have different places where you're, attaching yourself to different target audiences as a marketer. And in this case, this is a really incredibly interesting journey to be looking at what a gigantic audience has generated towards for a media format. Because it is a form of engagement with content that is unlike any other. And for that reason, being able to, start down a path and not have certainty as to where it's going, or not have certainty to the exact way to commercialize it, is in a very exciting place to be. And there's so many elements of the esports fans that 90% of them are, also players. I mean, I could be a great basketball fan. I'm almost glad I'm not even sitting next to Rick Fox, because I don't want to have to.
So is Rick.
I don't want to have to be in that circumstance. But this is a chance for people who have a passion for this sport to be an actual player and to be able to interact with pro players. And that touch point to me is pretty remarkable in the scheme of things, because sometimes there's some businesses that are just being exported to the internet. This is intrinsically part of it. And the more we learn to capitalize on that connection, I think the more we're going to see this grow into a very, very pervasive engagement for people beyond the current demographics.
Very insightful. Peter?
Yeah, mine was a bit of a hurry up and wait exercise. I was involved with a company called GameSpy a long, long time ago. You're familiar with those guys. And we did some competitive kind of voyeuristic gaming back then. This is like early 2000s with Half-Life and Diablo, and Quake. And back then, it was before bandwidth was commoditized. So the more people who showed, the more money we lost as a company. But we knew we had a thing. It just was going to be a while. And so, again, kind of a gaming citizen of the world, watched how it was blossoming in other markets. And when we saw it start to take a toehold here, just was a very exciting, emotional moment, if you will, because its time had come. And again, I think compounded by the quality of these ownership groups, has just given it an extra surge of momentum.
Great. Rick?
So, my moment came through a father-son relationship that grew through video games and led us to a moment in time in Madison Square Garden where every sensory memory I had from my years as a professional athlete kicked in all at once. And I realized that the competition, the passion, the mastery as young men like Monkey Man here are pursuing should be celebrated, that it's here. My son didn't become a professional basketball player like myself, but he is living in a world today that the doors are being kicked down in opportunity, whether it is as a pro gamer or as a coach, as a GM, as an owner. All of these opportunities are springing up for a generation of kids and gamers who are demanding it now. They're not ashamed of it. They're not hiding behind their gaming passions or their love for video games. And for me personally, seeing my son come out of his shell and owning that and fighting for that and enjoying, once again, being a part of a competitive environment was what did it for me.
That's great. Jack?
It's tough to pin down a single spot, but I think when I was working with Team Solomid and taking them to PAX Prime and seeing the fans just line up rings around our booths where we're having a signing and seeing how excited the fans were to just meet their players, and I really got that feeling wow, this is not just playing video games. This is actually a fandom that's similar to traditional sports, and this is actually going to go somewhere because these people love these pros.
Yeah. I think one of my moments was I had a father approach me at one of our events and say that he had always, two sons, one kind of physically large, playing traditional sports, the other one in his room a lot playing video games. And because of that, he had attached a perception to the younger 16-year-old that he wasn't in his image, that his son wasn't very competitive and was quiet and reserved. And through some of our events, watching his son play League of Legends, he realized that actually the one who was out playing football kind of wasn't that into practice and kind of slacked off a lot and maybe wasn't so in his image. And it was actually changed his whole view of the younger son, where he saw so much more of himself, but had to see him in a different environment around the games he loves. So I just want to thank our panel here. All of you are really bravely kind of defining this gigantic space, the big time, as we say. And what I appreciate too is that you're doing a lot more than just going after a very profitable category. You're building teams and you're also building character. So thank you for that, and it was nice to spend time with you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.